North Korea is a regime arming with missiles and weapons of mass destruction while starving its citizens. Iran aggressively pursues these weapons and exports terror, while an unelected few repress the Iranian people's hope for freedom. Iraq continues to flaunt its hostility toward America and to support terror. The Iraqi regime has plotted to develop anthrax and nerve gas and nuclear weapons for over a decade. This is a regime that has already used poison gas to murder thousands of its own citizens, leaving the bodies of mothers huddled over their dead children. This is a regime that agreed to international inspections, then kicked out the inspectors. This is a regime that has something to hide from the civilized world. States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world.
Welcome to the Michael Brooks Show. I'm Michael Brooks. We're broadcasting live from Brooklyn, USA, where left is best, as it is everywhere else, with super producer Matt Leck.
Bonjour.
Head theoretician David Grisham.
How's it going?
Super producer David Slavic. He's in the Discord, Twitter, a sphere, roaming the digital landscape of the TMBS universe as we move on. We move on the capitalistic bitch. On this week's program, Meagan Day. She's a writer for Jacobin. We're talking about why neoliberalism makes all of us our own tyrannical bosses, the skill gap myth, what really drives unemployment, and the truth about inequality. And then my old teammate, my old running mate, the dude that I got started in this business with, Matt Binder, is here. And we are talking about what else? Right-wing idiocy on the internet. Also, some Mick resistance idiocy on the internet. And then, and I know you're watching, Jordan Peterson, people, our old friend Jordy, he had another meltdown on the internet. Well, Matt and I, if we were in the same room as all of you, would slap you happily. We'll get to that.
But we also want to say, You've come to the right place and welcome.
Yeah, welcome. Look, I'm all for it. Eat a high-protein breakfast, get some runs, clean your room. Now learn about how the world actually works. It's the Michael Brooks Show. But first, we need to start with the 15-year anniversary of the invasion of Iraq. 15 years ago today, the U.S.-UK-led coalition engaged in its first aerial bombardment of Iraq. This was the culmination of years, in fact, of propaganda, mass marketing, which culminated in 2001, 2002, and then 2003 before the invasion. Let's give you a taste now of who some of the prime villains of that era were. First, this is Tony Blair, who is George W. Bush's partner in crime, someone who is hyped by the same resistance people that you will listen to today. Those same types loved Tony Blair, and he gave permission to liberal hawks to intellectually support a global crime. This is Tony Blair hyping the case for the invasion of Iraq in the British Parliament. Here he is.
And in this dilemma, no choice is perfect. No choice is ideal. But on this decision hangs the fate of many things, of whether we summon the strength to recognize the global challenge of the 21st century and meet it, of the Iraqi people groaning under years of dictatorship, of our armed forces, brave men and women of whom we can feel proud, whose morale is high and whose purpose is clear, of the institutions and alliances that will shape our world for years to come. To retreat now, I believe, would put at hazard all that we hold dearest. Turn the United Nations back into a talking shop, stifle the first steps of progress in the Middle East, leave the Iraqi people to the mercy of events on which we would have relinquished all power to influence for the better. Tell our allies that at the very moment of action, at the very moment when they need our determination, that Britain faltered. I will not be party to such a course.
So that pretentious flourish was a main buttress of the reason that the invasion of Iraq went forward, and all of it there. We say Orwellian too much as a cliche, but we need to preserve the UN by violating its dictates. We need to support international institutions by openly mocking and disregarding their guidance. All of the things that he talked about were undermined and exploded in the Middle East. And of course, Tony Blair has went on to be a very successful, high-priced global consultant for dictatorships and Fortune 500 companies, which is exactly where he belongs. Here is George W. Bush, when not painting, being given a pass by Ellen and being rehabilitated in the public mind just because he isn't overtly racist in public, announcing the invasion, the outset of this crime in Iraq 15 years ago.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger. On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war. These are opening stages of what will be a broad and concerted campaign.
George W. Bush presided over a global crime in Iraq, an international torture regime, and an invasion of Afghanistan, which has also killed many civilians and continues to this day. We have an environment now where the intellectual architects of these catastrophes, who are not that different in outlook from the Trump world, are rehabilitated because they're able to go out on TV and recognize that Donald Trump is a scumbag and most likely a criminal, like as if that's some great credit. To quote Bush himself, talk about the soft bigotry of low expectations, except they benefit from that soft bigotry and the rest of us suffer for it. David Frum wrote that delusional, stupid, nonsense speech about an axis of evil, falsely equating North Korea, Iran, and Iraq. Bill Kristol pontificates about Trump while never having recanted his support for the invasion of Iraq. Jonathan Chait weasels and worms about international law and UN resolutions when he went along for the ride. And of course, we know frontline Democratic politicians like Hillary Clinton. We can't forgive a few bad gun votes with Bernie, but we can forgive an invasion that killed over 1 million Iraqis by some estimates, caused a global regional refugee crisis, and led to the creation of IS. That's what this was. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a mishap. It was a crime. It's a crime that we all live with the burden of, but most particularly Iraqis, whose limbs were blown apart, whose homes were destroyed, who had to flee their country. And of course, the veterans who died have PTSD, missing arms and legs and eyesight. For these people's delusional, stupid, grotesque, ideological, or narrow self-interested adventurism. None of those things have worked out better. We have an entrenched apartheid in Israel-Palestine. And none of these people have the excuse of saying that there weren't people saying that this was wrong at the time. George W. Bush dismissed protesters on the streets of the United States, millions of people going against an authoritarian environment where almost nobody was allowed to go on TV and make the alternative case, where people like Andrew Sullivan called people who opposed the invasion, compared them to a fifth column in the United States. This environment, people protested. And of course, we had world leaders. Joschka Fischer, who was Germany's foreign minister, said this to Donald Rumsfeld's face at the Munich Security Forum. And look at Rumsfeld's look of disgust while Fischer tells him that he is not convinced.
Nur meine Generation hat dabei gelernt, you have to make the case. And to make a case in the democracy, you must convince by yourself. Excuse me, I'm not convinced. This is my problem. And I cannot go to the public and say, oh, well, let's go to war because there are reasons and so on. And I don't believe in that.
Joschka Fischer was clear. And now Nelson Mandela, the most preeminent leader in the world. There was a parallel track also that went along with this at the time this was recently reported on. The government of Thabo Mbeki, who is Nelson Mandela's successor, was working with the South African intelligence agencies because of the connections with the Saddam regime going back to the apartheid era to document that their chemical weapons and WMD programs were over and done. The Bush administration didn't want to hear a thing about the parallel track South African investigation. So that was happening on a policy level, and Nelson Mandela had this to say at the time.
What we do should not be done by anybody. And if there is a country that has committed unspeakable atrocities in the world, it is the United States of America. They don't care. They don't care for human beings. 57 years ago, when Japan was retreating on all fronts, they decided to drop the atom bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Killed a lot of innocent people who are still suffering from the effects of those bombs. Those bombs were not aimed against the Japanese. They were aimed against the Soviet Union to say, look, this is the power that we have. If you dare oppose what we do, this is what is going to happen to you. Because they are so arrogant, they decided to kill innocent people in Japan who are still suffering from that. Who are they now to pretend that they are the policemen of the world? What I'm condemning is that one power with a president who has no foresight, who cannot think properly, is now wanting to plunge the world into a holocaust. And I'm happy that the people of the world, especially those of the United States of America, are standing up and opposing their own president. I hope that that opposition will one day make him understand that he has made the greatest mistake of his life.
I remember the lies. I remember the drumbeat. I remember the implication that you hated your country if you didn't support this rush to destroy Iraq based on fantasies, militarism, delusion, greed, and fanaticism. And I'll always remember the people who hyped that war, the people who co-signed on it, the people who supported it, and the people who paved the way. Because if we don't, we will continue to degrade the standards. We will continue to allow a global system to mire under might makes right. And in another couple of terms, another couple of decades, we'll be looking back and being like, you know, remember how Trump would occasionally say some nice things about people? Occasionally pretend that he cared about civilian casualties? Those were the days. Because the guy we have now is so much worse. That's Bush. Iraq and the Wall Street financial crisis were the two core events that melted the corrupt technocratic oligarchic consensus. We're living with that consequence today with the right-wing, far-right backlash, Trump, Brexit, Modi, all of that. The only other option is a genuine left and the type of solidarity that Mandela talked about there. So remember it. Never forget that crime. And there's no excuse. It was known then. You had that information then. Period. Now, if you stay tuned for the next segment, we're going to be talking with Max Boot about why Trump is degrading the office. And we're doing a segment on woke interventionism. Let's get to the shout out really quick. We can just do it. If you want to just do a shout out, just a shout out. Shout out.
Let me give a shout out to my real bitch. Bigger than life. Let me give a shout out to Miss Good.
All right, so look, two shout outs. I love the title. We might need to switch that up. Maybe, you know what, Danarchy. I don't want to get greedy, but if Danarchy could give us a shout out beat, that would be ill. Larry Krasner, the new Philly DA, is the real deal. He came in there and started firing people and cleaning up shop. We played that clip and celebrated that move a couple of weeks ago, and he has just released a new policies directive, which actually was put out in February but has been released to the public today, which Sean King is calling a absolute game changer. I'll just quote from Sean King really briefly. All of that is big, but nothing is as essential and revolutionary as the internal 5-page guiding document of new policies that Krasner sent to his staff. While the document appears to have been sent to the staff of the Philly DA's office in February 15, 2018, it only has become the public a week ago. I study prosecutors for fun and a living. I'm that type of guy. And he goes on to explain the incredible step here that Krasner is taking. I'm actually just going to quote briefly from this document. We're going to do more coverage on it. But he says, decline certain charges. Do not charge possession of marijuana or cannabis regardless of weight. Do not charge any offense related to the paraphernalia or buying from a person where drug involved is marijuana. Do not charge prostitute cases against sex workers where a person who has been arrested has 2 or no prostitution convictions. Withdraw all pending cases in these categories. Individuals who have 3 or more convictions shall be charged. He does say that. Then he's talking about lowering, charge lower gradations for certain offenses. So in other words, seek less, fuller punishments, obviously. Divert more. All attorneys are directed to approach diversion and reentry with greater flexibility and an eye towards achieving accountability and justice while avoiding convictions where appropriate. For example, an otherwise law-abiding and responsible gun owner who is arrested because he does not have a permit to buy a firearm may apply for individual consideration for diversion. And he goes on to list other things involving drunk driving and cannabis. He also talks about the probation, which was implicated in the Meek Mill case, which was an incredible, shocking over sentence. And this is actually a kind of a broader push that he goes into on reducing sentencing, and it opens this way again briefly. The United States has the highest rate of incarceration in the world. It has increased over 500% in the past over a few decades. Pennsylvania and Philadelphia have been incarcerated at an even higher rate than comparable U.S. states and cities for decades, and a 700% increase over the same few decades in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia in recent years has been the most incarcerated of the 10 largest cities. Yet, Pennsylvania and Philadelphia are not safe as a result. In talking about the financial, and then he goes on to actually talk about the financial cost to the taxpayer in harsh sentences. And then he goes on to say, facts you should know and consider in making your recommendation. The actual cost, including pension and other benefits to correctional employees. He ends up basically, the cost of an unnecessary incarceration at 40 is in the range of the cost of 1 year's salary for a beginning teacher, police officer, firefighter, or social worker. That's between $42,000 and $60,000. You may use these comparisons in record. And then he goes on to explain how this information can be used in reducing sentencing, and there's several other key areas in this document. But this is somebody who ran on a clear agenda and is implementing it with no bullshit. And he's doing a shock doctrine on the forces of reaction. One other thing I want to include, then we'll get to Meagan Day really quickly. This from the amazing Discord community we have. There is organizing going on in that Discord community. And one group is organizing action on behalf of home care services in California. Basically, people in California, I don't want to I'm not sure how much specifics to get into, but people in California who need home care assistance but are on Medi-Cal and not privately insured, they get less money. The private home care services for taking him on. And that means people can be often left without vital attention, including particularly on overnights. So the group is basically in California designed to put pressure on state reps to try to do something and create accountability legally and policy-wise in that area. So the Twitter handle to check is a Twitter. It's at Home Care Our Way, and the website is www.how-now.org, and we'll have a link to that. I'm incredibly impressed by the Discord, and that flows right into the pitch. This is the most bold pitch music we've. So basically, in synchronized with the song, we're going to stop the show and go rob Chapo Trap House. We're just going to take their shit. The show is growing. I appreciate all of you. Animations are, I saw the mock-up of Obama in a bow tie and a fez. The first one's going to be ready. We're going to ship it next week. We're thinking about our goal. What are we going to do when we hit 2,000? That's our main next stretch goal. The last group call with Jabari Brisport on how to run for public office was actually available to all patrons, so a lot of you showed up. It's a great reason to come in at that higher level. We're hosting educational calls, more direct Q&As with me, and actually cooking up some other more sort of entertainment-oriented things as well. So you know what it is. I appreciate all of you. Thanks for spreading the word. Things are moving. We're committed to every aspect of this journey and campaign, and I appreciate all of you. Patreon.com/TMBS. Where else are you going to get all of this? And we will never, ever, ever, ever give in to anybody that would justify anything involving rock or financial crimes or anything else. We run completely independently. We're dependent on you. And that's the way we always want it. Patreon.com/TMBS. We'll be right back with Meagan Day. That was a very weird time for hip-hop. Welcome back to the Michael Brooks Show. Joining us now is noted 50 Cent fan. No, I'm just kidding. I'm making that up. That's fake news. Or maybe not. And staff writer for Jacobin magazine, Meagan Day. Meagan, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Meagan, you have a couple of new pieces dealing. First, let's deal kind of big picture with this idea of neoliberalism making each of us our own bosses. I've heard this rhetoric before, but it's actually usually been phrased as this is liberation. You get to set your own destiny. And you've kind of framed it as now we're sort of our own kind of wardens in a way. Can you explain that?
Yeah, basically, neoliberalism is since the mid-1970s, neoliberal, political economic regimes have basically replaced things like public ownership and collective bargaining with things like deregulation and privatization, which, these things promote the individual over the group in the sort of fabric of society.
Right.
Basically, this creates competition between workers. That's really a big, important part of neoliberalism, is the idea that workers are in competition with each other for good jobs, for wages, and they're willing to sort of they have to both sell themselves short a little bit, as in take maybe lower wages than they want, and also promote their work in a really intense way by acting as their own brand ambassadors and sort of brokers of their own labor. They have to do both of these things at once in order to secure jobs, because jobs are less secure than they ever have been. And yeah, you'll hear it promoted as being your own boss is great or whatever, but the sort of casualization of various industries, the freelance economy, the gig economy and things like that. And even not just that, but even more traditional workers like retail workers are often in a situation where they're having to, promote themselves to the manager to pick me for this shift, right? Because I need to work more hours. Pick me, I'm good, look at me, right? And this idea that you have to basically be your own, labor broker, like I said, in pretty much every situation. You don't have a guaranteed, regular, time delimited, very reliable set of hours or a job that you're going to have for the rest of your life, or a union be safe, or labor protections that that you can rely on, or rules that the game is even played by. You don't have those things anymore, and so essentially everybody's their own little entrepreneur, and their own brand is sort of their own cottage industry. And as a result of that, you have all of these individual workers basically acting like tiny little micro businesses competing against each other. And of course, what happens when businesses compete against each other is they lower their prices, right? Well, if your business is yourself, you're lowering the price of your own labor in order to undercut the competition. This is great for capitalists to see all of us squabbling, all of us pulling each other down like lobsters in a pot, right? So that's sort of the idea that, and you can be your own boss in neoliberalism, and it may not be so great.
So it seems to me, and we're going to get, because you also really have some very interesting, you're referencing work on the psychological consequences of this, but it seems like, okay, there's kind of three parts of this. There's sort of like the myth that's sold, and I think we see this in everything from the really woo-woo kind of like secret stuff that was popular years ago to now the more hard-edged kind of dealing with like the Jordan Peterson thing, which is actually a major subtext of his work. And you mentioned lobsters, so that brings him to mind, right? Like lobsters on everybody's brain because of that hysterical guy now. But there's the sense of like the cultural myth as this means more freedom than ever. It seems like then there's a reality that's setting in for more and more people as this becomes more and more broadly experienced, that like for a lot of people overall, it means more exhaustion, less wages, more perfectionism, which we'll get to in a minute. But then at the same time, it's also like reality. So it brings that kind of, or the current reality, not reality in terms of, preset and not changing, but it is our context now. So how do we, what's the sort of balance as people kind of come to the realization of those myths with like, how do we operate in the world as it is when that reinforces all the problems of how it is? Because you know what I mean? Like we need to actually, like solidarity is the anecdote, but there's no context for it right now in what you're talking about.
Yeah, totally. I mean, definitely competition. This kind of competition is useful to the capitalist class primarily because we're all willing to cut our own wages or give up massive amounts of our own time in order to attract employers. But it's also attractive because it keeps us from building, attractive to the capitalist class, that is, because it keeps us from building solidaristic bonds with each other. It drives people further into isolation, and you see this borne out, and lots of studies show that people are feeling more isolated than ever before. And obviously, this is going to be in large part because people don't live, in as stable communities as they once did, or they don't perhaps live close to their families and things like that. It's going to be because of social media, but it's also just because of the idea that everybody kind of feels like they're out for themselves. And it's really hard because you don't have a social safety net, really. So you're free to succeed, right? But you're also free to fail. Yep. And because you don't have that social safety net, you really have to watch out for yourself in this really intense way. And the idea that other people are posing a threat to you or are competition against you can really wear on your relationships with people and also wear on your sense of trust of other people. So there are some real psychological implications of this as well that make it impossible for us in some ways, or difficult and not impossible, to build solidarity, which is exactly what we need, especially as workers. Workers need to build solidarity in order to collectively bargain against the boss or collectively fight against capitalism. And neoliberalism is clever, and neoliberal ideology has cleverly divided us further and further and atomized us over time.
This relates to the research on perfectionism. Perfectionism used to be thought of and researched even as something that was sort of, when we still use this in the common usage, like, oh, I'm perfectionistic, or, it's something, the frame being like, that person's a perfectionist, and people are sort of on the outside like saying, hey, take it easy a little bit. In today's environment, it might be the world telling you need to be absolutely perfect.
Right. It's actually really fascinating. Yeah. So this is a paper that was put out by two psychologists named Thomas Curran and Andrew Hill. And all I did really was basically write up their paper and connect it to sort of my broader understanding of neoliberal capitalism. And people have been responding really well to this piece over the last couple of months. I think because it touches on something that people really experience. So what I loved about their piece, and they're not their paper, and they're not the ones who came up with this model, but they're using it, and it seems like psychologists are using this increasingly, is what's called a multidimensional perfectionism model. So psychologists used to think that perfectionism, basically the way we use it colloquially is like, I'm such a perfectionist. Mm-hmm. It usually means I'm holding myself to a very high standard. That's usually how we mean it colloquially, but that's not actually perfectionism as a concept, especially as it relates to, other sorts of like isolating or otherwise damaging psychological, consequences, is a very multidimensional concept. And there's, what we're talking about is self-oriented perfectionism. That's what we usually mean. Like, I'm holding myself to a high standard. But you can be a perfectionist and hold other people to a high standard as well, which is, being hypercritical of other people, which especially is heightened if you think of other people as competition for wages, right? Or like if they're encroaching on your niche, right? And you really need your brand to be like, people on essentially Twitter, it's this like giant labor market for people who work in the media industry, and everyone's worried about their niche or their brand being tarnished by somebody else acting as a threat, right? So other-oriented perfectionism is the name for this second kind of perfectionism, where you're basically scrutinizing other people for, signs that they're bad, signs that they are a threat, signs that they, anything that you can use to undermine them, anything they might be using to undermine you. So there's self-oriented perfectionism, which is me looking at me, and there's other-oriented perfectionism, which is me looking at you. Right. And then there's this third category, which is they say is actually the most debilitating and most harmful of the three categories. And it's basically a consequence of these two over time. If you live in a society where everybody's watching themselves very closely and everybody's watching everybody else very closely, you begin to have a phenomenon which they call socially prescribed perfectionism, which means that there's almost like a panopticon effect, where the entire society is basically structured to make everyone watch themselves, knowing that they're watching others, and the way they're watching others is the exact same way that others are watching them. And everybody feels like the entire society is just waiting for them to slip up so that they can write them off forever. And it causes extreme anxiety in people, and it causes feelings of depression and feelings of social alienation and neurotic self-examination, feelings of shame and unworthiness, and, stacking yourself up against other people and coming up short, and, what they called an overwhelming sense of pathological worry, which I thought was, as I think it's, it's alarming language, but a lot of people have, written to me since I've published this article and said that actually it is what it feels like to live in this society where everybody's their own sort of, like I said, the broker of their own labor and the keeper of their own future, right? Like we don't have a sense of collective responsibility for each other's future the way that perhaps we once did or perhaps we could. And so everybody's just watching out for themselves, right?
No, and it actually reminded me, and so I hesitate because it sort of opens up a whole other terrain. But one of the things that has occurred to me with, especially, I think you see this is definitely a little bit more of a symptom of the kind of, as we get into our micro world in, politics and journalism and Twitter, a distinction between a kind of liberal and socialist position, but the distinction between saying, and not to say, I just did a commentary in Iraq. I think obviously certain people really are beyond the pale, but the distinction between saying like somebody has erred in some way, how do we evolve and transform and hold each other accountable and grow in the context of friendship and solidarity versus the sort of farcical preoccupation with this person's out. This person, this person did some, said something and now they're done. This constant hunt to monitor people, even when actually it's deployed in more justifiable ends. Like actually we're trying to, be aware of really important manifestations of things that are poisonous, right? Like, sexism as an example. But the instinct to chip people out versus bring people back in and co-move, I think is also, that's the perverted symptom of like even, how basically social justice language gets brought through this same filter to basically just demean other humans and not build solidarity.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's right. I think that basically what I tried to hint at, I only wrote one paragraph about this in the piece, and it's something that I'm interested in exploring in the future, is that when you see that happening in the political sphere, it's really not that much different than, when you see people like sort of obsessively like curating their Instagrams or whatever, or people sort of like preening over their college applications and so on and so forth. It really is just like this perfectionist impulse. But it's just that there's a heavy, especially on social media, there's, instead of that self-oriented perfectionism, you have basically an echo chamber that is like, it's like so conducive to this third type, this socially prescribed perfectionism, this idea that there are group ground rules, but you're not going to say what they are. You're not going to spell them out. They're just going to be, and you're not going to necessarily even tell people when they've crossed a line. People are just going to have to intuit that they've fallen out of favor, or they're going to hear it or see that other people have fallen out of favor, and then they'll watch themselves very closely. Right. And I understand that in the social justice context, this seems appealing to people, right? Because like if the line is a line of like racism or sexism, it makes sense to sort of like compel people to be more mindful of their actions and examine themselves more closely and perhaps even more ruthlessly. But it's also important to see that it's actually the way that the behavior manifests is on a continuum with some other behaviors that are like very clearly are very clearly encouraged by the neoliberal job economy and the sort of like psychological landscape that generates, right? And to think about those contradictions, which are, I think, pretty interesting. Yeah, I really look forward to further writing from you on that. Shifting gears to the more, I guess, the slightly more the parallel, but the tangible parallel, the jobs myth. I want to reference Third Way. Just to contextualize this a bit, they put out a new generation of ideas, social contract for the digital age. And basically, essentially that their big salvo and move for 2020 is going to be to kind of resurrect, essentially equipping people for the new economy. And I'm just going to quote briefly from Emily, who's from the Northeast.
we have a new economy, and I don't think we'll ever recover to the same place we were before. Things are different and change, and so we should change the mindset of individuals, companies, and government. We need to find solutions that adapt to this new economy and not live in the past looking for the way things were. Now, I say this for two reasons. One, the irony that this is actually ancient at this point, because the kind of third way centrist politics of Clinton and Blair and Obama and third way today is we won't have universal programs anymore, but we'll give some people essentially some job training and maybe some fraction of a chance to get out of a dire situation instead of just completely pummeling them constantly like the right proposals, the conservative proposals. But also that this focus on skills as the reason that there's a job crisis was suspect to begin with. And now that actually we do have a tightening labor market, it's collapsing before our eyes.
Right. That's right. Okay. So I think this is really, it actually kind of does tie into the thing that we were talking about before, which I know is the reason you paired them together. And the hinge that the hinge between them is meritocracy. Mm-hmm. So meritocracy is the idea that, social and professional status are the direct outcome of individual intelligence and virtue and hard work. And in the previous article about, being your own boss, that we're talking about how neoliberalism encourages us by selling us this meritocracy myth to think about, to sort of like constantly evaluate ourselves based on our successes or failures in the professional arena, and to basically translate those successes and failures as signs of our worth, right? Our intelligence, virtue, and hard work. So meritocracy manifests in all kinds of different ways. And one of the ways that, it has manifested is in this idea that, when unemployment was really high during the recession and it wasn't really going down, conservative economists said, well, there's a skills gap. So what is a skills gap? It basically was saying that, the American workers, there are jobs. Of course there are jobs. It's just that there aren't really the people who live in this country are not good enough for the job. So they need to improve themselves. They need to work harder. They need to be more intelligent. They need to cultivate their own skills. And if they do that, then companies are going to be able to get what they need. And if companies get what they need, then the whole of society will be better off. Because that's what conservative economics is really all about, is the idea of supply-side economics. It's that if corporations are getting their needs met, then the entire society will flourish. So all throughout the post-recession recovery, there were conservative economists really hammering this skills gap narrative. They were saying there are jobs, there will be jobs eventually. It's just that, once workers really sort of like work on themselves, then they're going to be ready for those jobs. It turned out to be garbage. And the reason that we know that it was garbage the whole time is basically that it's not, the narrative is collapsing. And now that there's a tightening labor market, you're seeing that corporations that said they couldn't hire X, Y, Z types of workers that had these extremely high standards, and they basically were saying, we want workers to try to meet these standards before we hire them. Now their standards are relaxing. So what were they doing that whole time? They were basically saying, they're just trying to get the best possible applicants for the lowest possible price. They were trying to pit workers against each other, heighten competition, and, throw out as many possible, applications as they could in order to find one perfect application of a perfect employee who was willing to work for the wages of an imperfect one. So this was essentially just corporations playing the game. They're trying to maximize their profits by driving down wages and heightening competition among workers. And it was packaged and sold to us with the myth, as the myth that, workers actually just weren't good enough for the economy. In fact, that workers need to fit into the economy instead of the other way around.
Right.
Well, now we see that corporations are basically like, oh yeah, we can. Well, now we can. We can hire people with criminal records. They're just taking that off. It's great, by the way. I think that's fantastic. But it's also really ironic because they were insisting that it would just be literally impossible for them to hire people who had been incarcerated. Not only are they hiring people with criminal records, But in some states where the labor market is really tight, they're actually hiring people who are currently incarcerated. And I'm not talking about like slave labor like you see. I'm talking about normal, full-time, normal wage jobs, like $14 an hour, wiring taillights or whatever, because they just need workers. And so this whole idea that the workers that existed were not good enough for their precious jobs is totally collapsing now, which is actually very kind of hilarious to watch, and also great for workers because there are more jobs available.
Right. It's a win-win. More jobs, which is better, and then we get to debunk a myth. I mean, this is broad, but I do want to just get your thought on this as a sort of final question, and I hope this is the first of many conversations. But do you think, and I say this like mindful that, you know, we have this third way document. I definitely think that a big subtext of the kind of Jordan Peterson thing is actually, you know, for people who are relatively privileged but still being buttressed by all of these forces, he's offering a map that speaks to the same anxieties and uncertainties about place and economics. So that being said, I'm just wondering do you think that there's a little bit less of a buy-in to the mythology that an individual can be an anecdote to this, and a little bit more of a receptivity that even though it's obviously going to be an incredible uphill struggle because the power in many ways is obviously in the hands of capital, but that fewer people are buying into these myths than maybe they were a couple of years ago. And they're starting to think like, well, wait a second, maybe it isn't just a question of me continuing to, you know, do some enhanced job trainings or redo my resume or update my website. Maybe this is really about that we are at a structural disadvantage. And the only way to anecdote that is the inversion of everything we've been talking about, individualism, perfectionism, and us competing against each other.
Yeah, I think this many years, we're 11 years out from the dawn of the recession.
Yep.
People have tried everything. I mean, people have retooled their resumes. People have gone back to school. People have taken on debt. People have refinanced the house. People have, this and that. They've changed careers. They've added a new job into their mix, and now they're working, at 50, 60, 70 hours a week. And it's not getting better. And I do think that what you saw, with the completely unexpected, unprecedented popularity of Bernie Sanders was a little bit of the myth crumbling. People were saying this just from personal experience. It's not even that they've encountered necessarily some sort of ideology that explains to them how exactly the myth of neoliberal meritocracy works and how it's oppressing them. It's just the personal experience of literally trying everything, especially since the recession began, and it's not working out. So it's got to be a con, right? If you've done everything by the book and you're still not able to make ends meet, it's got to be a con. And I think people are starting to realize that, and I think people are starting to see that they have to work together. And I think, very good example of that is the West Virginia teacher strike, which has just been like the most inspiring thing that I've seen since Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign. And when I watched a really Democratic Socialist America, I think, and Jacobin magazine and International Socialist Organization and some unions and some other really good folks put on a great panel with 3 of these teacher organizers from West Virginia. And one of them said something that was fascinating. She said, that they pass the hat all the time down there in Mingo County, where she's a teacher. They pass the hat to help pay for their kids' families' power bills on a regular basis. These are families that used to be middle class before the coal jobs went away, and now they're trying to help keep the lights on for these kids. And so they knew something had to change. It's like they knew something had to change for a long time. This wasn't just about the teachers' salaries. This was about like a deep, pervasive understanding that there was some kind of con that they were being subjected to. And what she said was, in the strike was basically an example of, instead of looking to a politician to change things, they looked to each other, right? Mm-hmm. So the teachers, and that's what the strike was. The strike was workers looking to each other and saying, "We're going to make this change ourselves.
We're going to make this change," and recognize that it's really just about power. It's not about meritocracy. And then that, secondly, we're not going to outsource our power. We're going to claim our power. It's beautiful. Meagan Day, contributing writer at Jacobin magazine. Please look at all of Meagan's work. It's very, very high quality. I really appreciate your time, Meagan.
All right. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Speaking of high quality work, Grisham, fucking David Grisham, gracing the pages of The New Statesman, which has also other luminaries, including George Orwell, Christopher Hitchens, Russell Brand, and our very own David Grisham.
Well, happy to join the pantheon, except for maybe Hitchens. But
except for Hitchens, you better watch it. That might be your path, man. We have to have, I think in the post game, we're going to play a game with Binzer where we describe what kind of right winger the four of us would all be. If all of us sold out, what would our lanes be? We're going to do that in the post game.
I like that game. I already have an answer for that.
I'm sure you do, because you're plotting your moves. But anyways, we have your picture. We have the article up on screen. I've already seen. We sent it out to patrons. There's a little bit of a pushback on it, which is good. That means that you created something which sparks some debate. So take it away, Grisham. What's the article?
Yeah, I mean, so basically, it's a short piece, but the fundamental argument is that in 2017 there was a lot of division over Antifa and especially the tactic of no platforming.
Right.
And basically, what we've seen over the past few months, especially since Charlottesville, is that the alt-right has been unable to mobilize in the same way as they were after Charlottesville.
Right.
And I say that, a large part of that is because of the work of Antifa, so that, we can still have questions about whether or not we think that, not taking somebody down who's speaking at a college campus is right, or, how much we want to use that tactic. But at this point, we really can't make the argument that it doesn't work. And even more so, we're finding that since the right wing is becoming more and more violent, and violence really is their domain, that having people who are at street protests who are willing to protect folks like, for example, Cornel West in Charlottesville is becoming an unfortunate but necessary part of left strategy.
Right. I mean, do you and actually, and I think specifically, Richard Spencer said recently that it wasn't fun to do college tours anymore. I mean,
well, yeah, I mean,
he said we're cucking out.
Oh, yeah, thank you. That was some alt translator there. I dig it.
I mean, and the thing was Richard Spencer's video actually that he posted after the Michigan State University speech that he had. I mean, that was a really actually incredible organizing to the organizers there, and shout out to them, because they got a bunch of students out there to shut down that event that the university didn't want to have, but they were forced to by a lawsuit by Richard Spencer to have, and they actually were able to shut it down during spring break. Which is a pretty incredible thing at a college campus.
Yeah. There's definitely higher priorities during spring break.
But I mean, and the point is that, he was saying that, this is fundamentally damaging to our tactics because he likes controversy, because controversy gets attention to his movement. And he says, we like to use this to present ourselves as curiosities, right? And at that point, there's always going to be controversy when these kind of people come to campus, when like right-wing, Nazis are showing up at campus.
Right.
So like the only way to deal with that is you got to shut it down. Like you can't let him have the tactical advantage that he wants, which is just a little bit of controversy, but still able to have his event.
Yeah, it's interesting because I actually think I'm, in some ways, intellectually, I'm more persuaded by the idea of complete silence and ignoring and let them just be, but that's not going to happen. But just so if it's going to happen, get in their faces
and just to push back. I mean, I understand the idea of like ignoring it completely, right? But for people who feel very threatened by this, it's really hard to say to your comrades or friends, "I'm not going to do anything about it."
Well, dude, that's always been my bottom line. I don't have any. I'm kind of in some ways agnostic on certain parts of this debate, but my bottom line is that if Cornel West says Antifa protected us in Charlottesville, I'm pro-Antifa. Like that the actual reality of the ground is always going to supersede, wank fests on social media. And I don't like the word evidence because I'm anti-empirical, but yes, that would be another way of saying it.
Well, this also happened with Milo. Like Milo's security bills were getting out of hand, and he had to cancel his tour.
See, that's exactly.
That's the point. Is that even though and that's what somebody pointed out was that maybe Antifa wasn't necessarily responsible for Milo's downfall. Yeah. But I would argue in a lot of ways that they were. Yes, it was the right wing that was digging up the nasty things that Milo had said. But the point is that the infrastructure of the alt-right was always very weak, they're unable to sustain themselves in the controversy that they create. And using these tactics to sort of push them to stand up on their own 2 feet. They're not going to be able to do that. They need free media and they need free attention. And by shutting down their access to that through these kind of programs, you're not going to see them very much anymore.
Yeah, that's great. Oh yeah, go ahead.
The BuzzFeed Milo expose was really cemented this in my mind, because when it starts to strain their funding,
that's right.
sluices, and they have to be like, we need to hire more security for this event, and
right.
the merchants have to be like, is this really worth it? That's where you want them.
That's exactly where you want them. I agree with that 100%. Can you go back to the article for 1 second, and then we'll go to the pyramid, and then we're going to get pull up this again. New Statesman, David Grisham, how Antifa used no platforming to successfully fight white supremacy. And just scroll down to David's bio. Get to the most important part of the piece here. Oh, is at the bottom? It's at the bottom. Let's look at that. David Grisham is a contributing writer and researcher on the Michael Brooks Show. A left-wing podcast whose guests typically include figures from the left media, including Jackman Current Affairs and Chapo Trap House. Well, I already the big three. I co-sign on this article entirely. You buried the lead there.
I'm sorry. I'll start all my articles with.
I work for the Michael Brooks Show. All right, guys, we got to get to the pyramid. Do we have this sound ready for the pyramid? So, look, Cambridge Analytica might be bullshit. They might be scamming their own disgusting clients from the UK to Kenya to the United States. But there's no doubt that they're the global go-to firm of new psychographic techniques, that they're involved in right-leaning candidates from Uhuru Kenyatta to Donald Trump. The Mercer family invested in them. Stephen Bannon was a major player. And that Facebook, wow, shockingly, Facebook, which is essentially just a giant data mining operation masquerading as a social network, somehow didn't keep a tab on its individual privacy guidelines. And what was it, up to 50 million profiles, I believe, were illegally or in violation of Facebook's rules obtained by Cambridge Analytica to build their psychographic models. We have a clip now of this. What's this guy's name? I forget his name.
Christopher Wiley.
Christopher Wiley, who is the whistleblower, who I still do not like, for Cambridge Analytica, talking about it to Don Lemon.
What did the Trump campaign think Cambridge could offer? What were their goals? Do you know?
Well, very soon after I left, I know that Alexander Nix was going and meeting with Corey Lewandowski in the spring of 2015, before Trump had even announced that he was running, when they were still working for Ted Cruz. I don't know why they had that meeting, but you'd have to ask Cambridge Analytica, what is it that they were pitching? Why were they talking to Donald Trump before he'd even announced? How did they know that he was running before he'd even announced? And what is it, if it wasn't for this data and if it wasn't for these algorithms, what is it that you were pitching and what is it that you're using?
Those are good questions. More about Corey Lewandowski in a moment. You also say that Cambridge Analytica was testing Trump slogans as far back as 2014, right? And this was before he started running. Terms that seemed fringe at the time, but and let me get the question out so you can answer. It ended up being part of the Trump mantra. These are terms like deep state and build that wall. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we were testing all kinds of messages and all kinds of imagery that included, images of walls, people scaling walls. We tested Drain the Swamp. Testing ideas of the deep state and the NSA watching you, and the government is conspiring against you, and a lot of these narratives, which at the time would have seemed crazy for a mainstream candidate to run on. Those were the things that we were finding that there were pockets of Americans who this really appealed to, and Steve Bannon knew that because we were doing the research on it. And I was surprised when I saw, the Trump campaign, and it, started, talking about, building walls or draining the swamp. And I'm remembering in my head, wait, we tested this. So, you'd have to ask the company, and Steve Bannon where they got these narratives. But I know that we were testing these narratives, well before Trump had even announced.
So that's actually fascinating. And look, global influence peddling and opinion formation, the nexus of political consulting firms, private intelligence agencies, public intelligence agencies, these tools have been used in foreign propaganda operations on behalf of the United States military, as an example. Cambridge Analytica's sister company deals with military propaganda. So you need to use, as with so many things that come out of the grotesqueness of Trump, you need to use this as a door to look at it structurally. The other major lesson of this is fuck Facebook. Fuck Mark Zuckerberg. Fuck them. I could not imagine for a second that they were, in the best case scenario, lax about this. This is their whole business model, is forms of data sharing, privacy violation, and data mining. That's how they make their money. They don't care. Privatized commons that rely on your movements to micro-target you are never your friend, period. And according to BBC, the FTC is investigating Facebook. The commission is investigating whether Facebook violated the terms of a 2011 decree regarding the social network's privacy protections. An unnamed source familiar with the agency's thinking had not authorized to speak on the record, told the Washington Post newspaper. This was confirmed by a Bloomberg report, and that under the 2011 decree, Facebook must notify users and obtain their permission before data about them is shared beyond the privacy settings they've established. Washington Post says Facebook was subjected to 20 years of privacy checkups to ensure compliance.
To help with connectivity.
Facebook, Cambridge Analytica, sentenced to the pyramid. Unfortunately, I'm sure Facebook will be out. I don't know if Cambridge Analytica is just a flash in the scumbag pan. We have a new track that DJ Danarchy sent us. We're going to play it. Actually, we'll play it, and then we'll get Matt Binder up here. But let's play this new DJ Danarchy track featuring Jade Hoy and Big Waz, Wozni Lembre, from Count the Dings.
Yeah, we're going to have to
Patreon.
get them on in Count the Dings era.
Yeah, of course. That's going to happen soon, no doubt. There's a lot of Count the Dings conversations happening. DJ Danarchy. Let's check this out.
Ooh. 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 I really think that if Gandhi was alive today, he'd be contributing columns to Breitbart.
Seriously, this is not a joke. The only real privilege in America is American privilege.
That guy's such a fucking moron.
The Michael Brooks show is funny. I never realized it was like kind of like a comedy show.
None of you are as funny as Jerry Seinfeld.
Facts don't care about your feelings.
You cut that out now, or you'll go home in an ambulance.
World star, baby, world star.
Yeah, that seems mildly inappropriate for a political discussion.
And there you go. Bada bing, bada fucking boom. Another win. Another win.
Mike is smart. Mike is smart. Mike is smart. Mike is smart. Mike is smart, dude. Mike is smart. Mike, dude.
Patreon/TMBS. Don't get triggered. Snowflakes.
These are facts, and facts don't care about.
Hey, shut up.
If a woman is an 8 and you have her go number 1 on you, does that make her a 7?
It makes her a 9.
That's a sexist microaggression because he's treating her like she's a helpless female. Of course, he's also treating her like she's a woman. But how would he know?
Because I met her, you dumb fuck.
These people make Saddam Hussein look like a choir boy.
Oh, paste the double.
That's the hook, man.
I think it's very important to say, I'm a fat little redhead.
Oh, paste the double.
That's the hook, man.
Let's come back. TJ Danarchy featuring Jade Hoy. And Big Wise, count the dings, check them out. I love it. Joining us now, a very, very, very special TMBS with more MB. Matt Binder.
More MB, right?
More MB. The host of the Doomed. Let me try to actually teach me how to do it.
How to do what? How to say the name of the podcast?
No, the way you do it. Don't be a schmuck.
All right.
Yeah, tell me how to do it.
It's Doomed.
No, that's not how you do it. You go Doomed.
Oh, that's not me. That's
Oh, that's
no, that's.
I
Not
thought it was
me.
you.
No, that's a clip from Futurama.
I was actually wondering how you made your voice drop like that.
Right.
I was like, Doomed.
Michael's like, I thought that was a voice talent over here.
Yeah, what the hell?
See, one of the good things about calling your podcast Doomed is that there's a lot of like pre-recorded audio of people saying the word doomed. You'll probably have some trouble finding, like from a sitcom, someone say the Michael Brooks Show.
Not for long, my friend. We're in fucking New Statesman story descriptions pretty soon. The sitcom world,
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
And actually, so Doomed. Check it out. Check it out
Yep.
on.
Go to www.doomedpod.com.
And check it out also on Patreon.
And Patreon, yes, it's.
You're doing the Patreon.
I
thing.
just started a Patreon. I'm not as gifted at the art of self-promotion as Michael Brooks is.
Very few are.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true.
I'm gonna say thank you and fuck you. To both
I gotta say,
Yeah.
from my years here when I was with the Majority Report, there was no one better at building his own brand than Michael Brooks.
I got to, man. That's
Right.
what happens when you're when you're a poor boy.
Patreon.com/Matt Binder.
TMBS. No, sorry, do it again.
What do you have, like 1,000 something?
I do. It's been we've been fortunate. We've been working really hard at it.
Right,
But seriously,
1,000
like
Patreons.
a little over 1,200.
Right. Wow.
So tell me how many shows.
I'm waiting for. I'd be happy with 100.
Let's get Matt to 100. That's ridiculous. How many shows do you have out so far?
Just the 10th episode officially went up today.
Who have you had on so far?
I've had Ashley Feinberg of the Huffington Post.
Yep.
Krang
writer.
T. Nelson, the leader of the Antifa super soldiers, or the right wing thought he was.
Right.
I've had Will Sommer of The Hill, and he runs a great newsletter called The Right Richter that follows the right wing internet sphere.
Right.
I've had on the whole Go Off Kings crew, which is Rob Wisman, Stephen Heck, and Jesse Farrar.
I was asking for highlights.
Right.
Give me
Oh, I'm giving.
give
You
me
know,
the
we've
whole
had
rundown.
I would say all 10 guests, or all 10 episodes have had guests worthy of the highlight reel.
I had a super fun time on your show.
That's right, and Michael Brooks.
I had an awesome time on your show, and I've been listening, dude. I mean, not to, and also because we're gonna dunk on him on a bit. You had Nathan Robinson on your latest
Yep.
episode to talk about Jordan Peterson.
The
whole thing is crazy. It's called Doomed.
You know, it was a lot of fun because we, I had Nathan Robinson on after Jordan Peterson had a tantrum over Nathan Robinson's article that he wrote.
Well, I think it was over. Did he have one over him too, or Pankaj Mishra?
Oh, those are two separate Jordan
Those are
Peterson
two-
tantrums.
Jesus, I only saw the Pankaj Mishra one. That was fucking amazing.
The one with Nathan Robinson is apparently, according to Nathan, he wrote a book with a friend many years ago that was basically a parody of the type of stuff Jordan Peterson writes.
Right.
And so, as a joke, halfway during his dunking on Jordan Peterson and his great article in Current Affairs, he put a little like Photoshop ad he made where if you like Jordan Peterson's book, check out ours. And in the ad it doesn't say it's a parody of it. But Jordan
But it's
Peterson,
pretty. But isn't it like literally like Nathan J. Robinson's Guide to a Sparkly Life or
Yeah,
something?
it's something like that.
Blueprints for a Sparkling
Yeah,
Tomorrow.
thank you. There it
so
is.
this
Yeah.
is not. This doesn't. Okay, so
Jordan Peterson apparently.
You got the tweet right here. This is what he said.
Shall
no,
I
you
read
can
it?
go. You
Oh,
go for
okay.
it. Yeah,
This is Jordan. You probably do a better Jordan Peterson than me. Go ahead.
So Jordan Peterson latched upon. So basically, yes. So as Matt was saying, I didn't actually know this is a real book. That's pretty funny. I thought it was just a graphic they did as a joke. So there's this ad, Blueprint for a Sparkling Tomorrow, which is, I mean, like what I don't understand is like you look at a guy like part of the reason that I'm a quasi Deepak Chopra defender is because the guy has like good game, and Deepak would in a second be like, oh, this is satiric thrust to mock my general project, and it's minimally funny. I'll take my money now. But Jordan Peterson does not have the savvy of a Deepak Chopra, so he goes, where did it go? That's just like, and done. It's so long a transition, motherfucker. Very critical article by Nathan J. Robinson of my work, including maps of meaning and current affairs. And he does provide a link to it. I'll give him that. Is hilariously accompanied by this ad.
And the guy,
so he thought, like, basically, like, Junior's trying to eat my lunch. Well, you know, like, if you're going to come at the king, you best not miss.
Like, how do you not realize that's like a parody ad or a joke ad? Or how do you not realize that even if it was a real ad, the guy whose website it is made the ad? Like,
Don't
there's
you
no
think
way.
that he's like kind of, I mean, I don't know. Peterson is he's joke challenged.
Yes,
he's super earnest.
We were talking about that in the
Yeah.
podcast. He does not like get, I guess you can say, societal norms.
I wish I could strangle bitches. I'm not saying I should. Why do I want to strangle bitches? Because they're bitches, also lobsters.
And I mean, I gotta say,
it's in the mythical resonance of the field.
Jordan Peterson is actually one of the guys who flew under my radar. I'm usually on top of these type of guys. And
this was the only dude I was ahead of you on.
Yeah, I really do think,
This is the only one.
In fact, I think one of the earliest mentions of him came from you, actually.
Well, you know what it is? I do think that, like, he speaks to real needs. Like, all kidding aside. Like,
right.
he speaks to alienation.
Right.
And an alienation of a specific group. And there isn't, and I also think, like, you know, look, some people need that kind of guidance. Like, it's easy to make fun of, but I don't have a problem per se with, like, you know, clean your room, or it's a good idea to, like, you know, eat healthy or whatever. Those are generally good pieces of advice. So, and
but like his 12 rules, I think I never saw all of them till recently.
Right.
And I'm looking through them and I'm like, wait, people are paying for this shit? Like, it's not even like, oh, like, okay, no one's rewriting history or rewriting a human being and the human life.
Right.
But usually when someone's getting accolades for their step-by-step process and how to better your life, there's some thought process behind it. I'm looking through these rules. One's like the golden rule. You got to pay someone to tell you the golden rule? I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yes,
another one is
like my Patreon page. I'm killing both of you little jokers on my Patreon page. Maybe you should get into the chronic masturbator video game self-help hustle, you fools.
Another one is pet cats. The other one is to sit up straight. I mean, there's a number of them that are, like, one is really weird that says if you're something like, if Matt, if you could pull up the 12 rules, that'd be great. But one of them is like, if your children are having fun or a good time, then you're not doing your job. I'm paraphrasing here, but it's just like, it's unbelievable. But people are subscribing to these 12 rules are either bullshit or like basic human knowledge that you get from your grandparents. Like, my grandma should have written this book.
That would have been interesting if your grandma's queen, like, stop and pat cats, stand up straight, don't be an asshole.
Of course, Tyler Cowen has these on his blog.
Right, of course. Stand up straight with your shoulders back. You know, fair enough. Treat yourself as you would someone you were responsible for helping.
That's the golden rule, but not as well written as, like, the guys who wrote it those, like, many years ago.
But that's a helpful. It's a reframe, but I guess it's like that's the type of quote, though, that sticks in somebody's mind when they say, maybe I shouldn't have the 6th Mountain Dew, Matt.
Yeah, but
I don't know. That's
treat others how you'd like to be treated is the golden rule. That's better written than that bullshit.
Yeah, that's worse.
But he's not saying to treat people well, though. It's a slightly different thing.
Treat yourself like you would
someone you're responsible for helping. Yeah. It's not about treating other people. It's all about how you treat yourself. That's all about self-discipline. Treat yourself as someone you're responsible for helping. Make friends.
Do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. That's what I was talking about. Which sounds like a really good way for your children to grow up hating you.
Yeah, that's an interesting. I don't know that that's definitely some authoritarian parenting probably packed up in there. Make friends with the people who want the best for you. I guess that would be friends.
Yeah,
I mean. Compare yourself to who you were at yesterday and not with somebody else today. Now, yeah, but right. okay,
I mean, it's
whatever.
Such basic,
Although they
like,
just,
it's not even like well.
but what he's going to do in the book,
phrased
I
or
haven't read the
written.
book, but the real problem that he has and why he stands out is that all this banal shit is going to get connected with bad politics that naturalize inequality.
Right.
That's the real problem.
One of the things I was talking about with Nathan on that
Right.
on the Doomed episode was that it's so vague.
Right.
You could subscribe any ideology to this and just say, "Oh, Jordan Peterson was speaking to me, a right winger," or "Jordan Peterson was speaking to me, a literal white supremacist." Jordan Peterson was speaking to me, a center liberal. You could really subscribe to anything here, and I kind of
I like don't bother kids when they're skateboarding. I'm down.
Right.
That's a good one.
But that sort of goes against his previous one that was basically don't let your kids do anything that you would dislike.
Well, hey, kids can skateboard as long as they stay the fuck out of your way. It's like me. If I have kids, I'll be like, look, you can do whatever you want. Just don't ever fucking look at me in the eyes.
Also,
no eye contact.
Rule 10 coming from Jordan Peterson is hilarious.
Be precise in your speech. Be precise.
Now, to me, from what I've listened to of Jordan Peterson, and I'm sure I'm not the only person to make this
Should
comparison.
I say that my TA has incredible mega titties? Yes. Will I get in trouble? Probably. Shouldn't I get in trouble? That'd be good. But does she have nice mega titties? Definitely. Do those mega titties give me an erection? Yes. Is erections a force for order and an antidote to chaos? Yes. Is too much of an erection chaos? Yes.
I'm pulling out the energy drink, all right? I'm pulling out the energy drink.
There we go. There we go.
Uh-oh, I hope I didn't send us into a Ken
You
line.
didn't send us into a parallel world. No, we'd have to do an alt-right show. It's like, I live in Brooklyn. I think, shows are cool. But my issue is, why are black people so resentful?
As I was saying before you went on your Jordan Peterson tangent, he sounds a lot to me. It's not the same beast, and they obviously are in different niches.
Right.
But the vagueness, the subscribing anything to it, any ideology to it, the way both of their cults treat them and everything they say, you're taking them out of context. It's Sam Harris.
Oh, it's totally Sam Harris. This is the only difference is I think that we were talking about this earlier actually, with Ben Shapiro at the end of the day, Ben Shapiro, there's the posturing, but it's really just look, you're just a right winger and you just like right winger presented in twerp sophistry. Sam Harris gets to people's emotions because I think that a lot of his followers are people who have some type of specific religious trauma. And that's why he gets people so freaked out. And then I think, with Jordan Peterson, he's hitting people where they live. I think if you help a 16-year-old boy through their first breakup, you have a Twitter, YouTube foot soldier.
Right.
And
It's so
and the thing is, though, is that, but they need that.
It's so weird to me that
They need
kids that
that.
are going to this, how old is he? 50, 60-year-old guy, professor?
Am I ageless?
Let me
That'd
tell
be
you,
nice.
when I broke
Is
up-
my face oily? Could be.
When I would go through breakups in high school.
Do I want to finger my TA? Yes. If I did it, would it be chaos? Probably. Sorry.
But when I was 50 and 16,
Yes.
I'd listen to punk rock. I wouldn't listen to some 50, 60-year-old professorial guy giving me tips. I would probably would have laughed at that. That guy probably would have made me feel
for
better.
a father figure.
Can I say something here?
That's really what it is, without a doubt.
I think there's nothing wrong, obviously, with someone looking at him as a father figure. I wish they didn't, but
I think there's some things wrong.
well, no,
Yeah.
I'm not to criticize the individual. who's
No,
looking
I
at him
understand.
like that.
Well, you can't
But
criticize the individual because there's nothing more important.
what I found out from Nathan Robinson is that in the book jacket,
Yeah.
they call him a father figure to these people.
That's part of his self-promotion.
Listen, let me tell you, if anyone wanted to promote me as a bunch of strangers' dad, I'd leave money on the table. I'd say I'm not taking the money. I refuse.
Well, let me just say, I would think I would find it incredibly bizarre, and I would take the money. Well, let's go. Look, I think though that we gotta really make the distinction with all of these people between the legitimate or things that are going to be important to address that drive people to them versus what they're describing. And the weird thing about Jordan Peterson, I think that just seems to be the endless conclusion is it's some combination of just kind of banal, obvious sort of self-help stuff, some of which is probably positive and useful, which he ties together with reactionary politics and areas that he just doesn't even, his cultural Marxism story, I don't even think he knows it, but is really just like a reheated anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. And he's conflating, like, just even as an example, talking about French, like, postmodernists and the Frankfurt School is the same thing. Like, and it's not even that pedantic. Like, I'm telling you this based off of like an intro to theory course in college. Like, like this isn't like, I know it sounds like really highfalutin, but it's not. It's like you read two different groups of thinkers and you're like, these French guys who weren't even necessarily that oriented in Marxism, focused on social constructed identity through literature. And these German guys thought that capitalism was basically ordered through mass commercial culture. And incidentally, actually stifled the individual. So it's like, and both of these groups' works were banned by the Soviet Union. So somehow in this guy's conspiracy theory, the Soviets, or like the Marxists, they realized that class struggle wouldn't work, which even though actually class politics describe probably more of how the world works today than literally anything else, they realized it wouldn't work. And then they secretly banded together and they just were like, I'm going to substitute identity for class, and that's cultural Marxism. So it's this Soviet Frankfurt School French deconstructionist conspiracy theory, which incidentally runs parallel with a piece of time where, like, yeah, women and African Americans and gay people and other people were literally on the streets being like, I would like to be able to use public accommodations, please, and not live in an apartheid state, which he says, like, going out and putting signs to feel better about yourself, which I admit, that's a funny sketch. Like if MLK was just like, I just want to feel morally superior. Let's go and get beat with water hoses because I'm empty inside. My room's messy. So I'm willing to get assassinated to feel morally superior to people. That's literally what this motherfucker is saying. So I'm just saying, like, guys, if you want to like listen to his pep talks, cool, but you got to read a fucking history book.
You know what your Jordan Peterson sounds a little bit like?
What?
Remember Goldfinger from the Austin Powers movies?
Wasn't he Dutch?
Yes, but
How
that's
did he
what
sound? How did he sound?
Like, I can't do it. Okay,
I like
Matt,
gold.
this is your job, buddy. Go ahead.
I like gold.
I like gold. I can't yet.
Clean your room. Austin Powers. After we got to golf, so then we got to get to this meltdown. I guess we'll just keep going with this because this was the Robinson one was a kind of funny self-owned, but he had a serious meltdown on Pankaj Mishra. Everybody should read Pankaj Mishra in the New York Review of Books. Matt, you can pull up. Do you have the tweets handy?
Matt's doing like
no. I'm just saying whatever's
now.
easiest. Yeah, just bring up the tweets first.
He can bring up the material you need for your show, or he could do what I asked of him, and that is find an audio clip of Goldfinger from Austin Powers.
Yeah, let's. I would like to do a dated, not particularly funny to begin with, 2003 joke, please.
Oh, my, thank you. That's what I excel in.
You can excel in it really well. Okay, so just to briefly summarize, Pankaj Mishra wrote a brilliant. Pankaj Mishra actually went more into, like, Robinson did his incoherence, and Pankaj Mishra fit Peterson into a history of basically romantic reactionaries who seek like a hidden spiritual history to retrieve old hierarchies to justify and reinforce oppression. And this goes back from, this influenced Japanese fascism, Hindu Veda, obviously the Nazis. It's all across American history. And so that was the history that he situated Peterson in. It was a very interesting, very critical piece. And Peterson responded with a very thoughtful reply. You arrogant racist. And by the way, why is all of this? I thought racist was a word we're not supposed to use. You arrogant racist son of a bitch, Pankaj Mishra. How dare you accuse me of harmlessly romancing, quote, harmlessly romancing the noble savage? That's how you refer to my friend Charlie Joseph, who I've worked with for 15 years. This is apparently Pankaj Mishra made reference to some of, basically Jordan Peterson says he's been inducted into a Native American tribe. And the way Pankaj Mishra wrote it, even though there's no reason to doubt what Peterson is saying is true, Pankaj Mishra wrote it as like, he claims, which is a great like stealth dick way of being like, there's no reason to suspect not, and I'm not saying it, but I'm going to write it in a way that cast doubts on you just to be an arrogant, racist son of a bitch.
Well, that's not even the best tweet.
No, we're just warming
somehow
up.
this is not the
So
best.
no. This is right out the gate. And what's great is that he's quote tweeting himself here instead of having a thread.
Oh, look, I see Randy there. Randy from Twitter. Good guy.
Good guy.
He's funny.
He is funny. And you call me a fascist, you sanctimonious prick. And this is what is going to live on in infamy. This is going to never die. This will outlast Jordan Peterson's career. If you were in my room at the moment, I'd slap you happily.
Not even if you were outside or like near me, but if you were in my room, in the room I'm in currently.
Yeah, he's really setting a lot of conditions on an ass whooping. Imagine if rap sounded like that. Like, yo, man, if you were in a 5-foot circumference of me, I'd fuck you up.
By the way, now that we've shown your listeners the tweet and
Yes.
the tweets and you've read them, I thought I'd add a small little factoid here.
Yes, please.
This man who wrote these tweets has sold out at the Beacon Theater here in New York. He'll be here at the end of March. The tickets were $100 each. Wow. Beacon Theater is about a 3,000 seat venue. So yeah, this is the intellectual we have today.
I feel like playing, you know, on ourselves. I feel like playing the Cernovich, like, who's laughing now, Sam?
Yeah, no shit. I just found out Sam Harris was in town, so he sold out whatever venue he was at for $90 a ticket.
Ooh, Peterson's requesting that extra 10.
He deserves it. He gives way more practical advice. Like, imagine a 16-year-old kid is like, this girl dumped me, I feel terrible, and he's just like, ideas have consequences. We need to profile Muslims, but I'm not saying that. And if you say that I said that, you took me out of context. See a footnote of a footnote for another article where I said that, but didn't say that.
Sam Harris would know slightly better than to go on one of those.
Sam Harris is. Well, I mean, Sam Harris is like the very much the opposite end of the spectrum. Like, extremely so.
Both on it though.
Oh yeah, they both apparently got into a fight with each other on Harris's podcast.
I've been meaning to watch.
That was real. That was like the war of like twerp nonsense that means nothing.
I saw recently that I don't know about recently, but I was looking at the podcast Jordan Peterson's been on, and ooh, what a list of media appearances there. I really want to check out the one where he goes on Stefan Molyneux's show. I want to read that. I want to listen to that one.
No time for any Marxists, though.
No time for any Marxists.
Well, I guess same with people. Yeah, it's a similar thing with Dave Rubin. Us leftists never have any time to go on any shows.
Yeah, but here's the thing with Dave Rubin. Dave Rubin is
we're busy guys.
Yeah, that's right. Dave Rubin is a cowardly idiot, and he's the perfect synergy of craven and stupid, and he knows better than to have someone like you or I on his show. But Jordan Peterson, and this actually, because I've given Jordan Peterson almost one thing I've pretty much entirely give him is that, and let's play the crying video in a second just for fun, and then we'll move on. But I've give him points for like whether he's giving decent life advice or whether he's being a hysteric, like he seems sincere. He's been running around being like, the Marxists won't debate me. They won't debate me. They won't talk about the archipelago. They won't debate me. So Doug Lane, who hosts a great podcast, I mentioned this last week, Zero Books. I've been on his show. He's been on this show. I mean, not only is he a Marxist, he's an incredible, like, one of the most civil people I know in media, period. He went out to Peterson several months ago, and Peterson's people were like, yeah, we'll figure out a time. And now they're blowing him off.
Right.
So an opportunity to engage with a civil Marxist who would be nothing but respectful, but, you know, engage him in this way that he's been preening and demanding, he apparently doesn't have time for. So that's actually a moment where, again, I usually find him, even when he's being completely histrionic and ridiculous, sincere, but that's very sketchy that he won't do that show.
Well, like I said, it's on us, actually. People don't know this, but us, Michael, myself, Sam, we get invited to right-wing shows all the time. We just don't got the time.
Yeah,
we don't have
just
the time
blow them off all the time.
Yeah.
You're afraid of being exposed.
That's the main reason why no leftist has ever been on one of these shows that claims they can't find someone to debate.
That's right. Sorry, Sean can't make it tonight.
Right.
I just texted Sean Hannity.
Right.
Let's see. This is
just in case you weren't sure which one of the many Seans Michael was talking about.
Actually, no. Sean could be like some guy who hosts like a racist podcast out of like Ann Arbor.
That's
really, yeah. She's like, hey, why would you be on my racist show out of Ann Arbor?
And he would actually be self-aware enough to call it a racist show.
Hi, I'm Sean. I host a racist show out of Ann Arbor. That's the Trump era, baby. All right, here's Jordan Peterson. I know we're going to the well too much on this, but I can't help. It's just too funny.
Close reading of 20th century history indicates, as nothing else can, the horrors that accompany loss of faith in the idea of the individual. It is only the individual, after all, who suffers.
Oh, yeah.
The group does not suffer.
This is just a monologue, actually. He's really watching porn. Well,
when does the tag team start?
Only those who compose it.
Why isn't... I thought it was supposed to be black
Thus,
face,
the reality
Asian
of the
chest, Puerto Rican
must
booty.
be regarded as
It's
primary.
a lie. They don't use language precisely anymore.
Where's
is to be regarded seriously. Without such regard, there can be no motivation to reduce suffering, and therefore no
He must have
respite.
like a hemorrhoid or something.
Instead, the production of individual suffering can and has and will be again rationalized and justified for its supposed benefits for the future and the group.
What do you think happened in Jordan Peterson's childhood? Something. There was some sort
and
of
adulthood. I have a serious point. If you live in an industrial democracy like the United States, and if you could just be intellectually honest for a moment, what mass collective organizations through rational bureaucracy cause you more suffering and might even potentially end your life? Government or private corporations that lower your wages, deny you health care, box you in every type of corner imaginable? What in reality that you live under impinges on your life? Are you more afraid of the government or your boss? Get real. Come on, man. Matt. MRAs.
Michael.
You were also ahead of the curve on these guys.
Yep.
I have to say, I would prefer they watch this guy than the MRAs.
Right. Well, this guy's pretty. He's not.
No, he's not as bad.
No, not as bad.
It's
You're
a continuum, but he ain't as
Yeah.
bad.
This is the
That's the best case scenario for him, is that he's like an off ramp for like minor weird dickishness
Right,
versus
but this is where it
out
begins.
fashion. Well, I think the weird thing with him is I think he's an entrance and an exit.
That's true.
I
Yeah,
think that's a
good
very
point.
odd thing about him.
Yes.
I think that there's some people
like any asshole.
Head theoretician. But anyways,
So what do you wanna-
wash your hands, David.
What do you want to say
so
about the men's
I
rights
want you to
activists?
get back into the history of the MRAs and what their latest. They've been off the radar recently, but you just told me about an amazing thing that has brought them back on the map.
Right. So So man, MRAs. Wow, they really are the the intro to a lot of these right wing subgroups that came out.
Yep.
If you could track the the alt right, the different groups that harass women and anyone you could think of on the internet, like during Gamergate, it all starts with the men's rights movement.
Right.
And recently, you might have seen in the news this very sad tragedy where this bridge in, I think it was Miami.
I know it was in Florida. I don't know what
Florida,
city.
somewhere in
I don't know what
Florida.
city,
Yeah.
yeah.
So basically, this bridge collapsed. You've probably seen it on the news. I believe they've pulled some bodies from it.
Some
There
people
were
have died.
fatalities, yes. And it was some sort of new type of a bridge that they were able to like put it together and then just bring it already made and install it right there. It was some sort of new technology that this company has used apparently before, but this was the longest one they've ever done.
So
And-
basically, if you've seen this, you probably thought to yourself, "Oh my God, another failure of public-private partnership."
Right,
Wow,
right,
where
right.
our infrastructure is disastrously out of date.
Right.
This is another symptom of austerity and inequality. But the MRAs, they went to the
MRAs.
heart, the type of place
Right.
that we just don't have the balls to go.
Right, women engineers. So they're online, the MRAs. and various other right wingers.
Oh my God!
Are blaming women engineers for the collapse of this bridge, and the reason they blame women engineers is because there was an article on the university's website where they were interviewing I believe a graduate of the school who's a woman engineer.
Right.
And she talked about
that's a red flag.
And she talked about how she's been working with more women in the field. And inside the same article, whoever wrote this article for the college name dropped how the university was also installing this new bridge. So I guess MRAs and other right wingers aren't the best at reading comprehension.
Right.
So they read this and saw that she said she's working with more women in the field.
Right.
And then a completely separate reference to this bridge. And they said to themselves, oh, this bridge was built by a team completely compromised of only women.
So basically, this all-female
and by the way, the
bridge
company,
crew.
if you're,
We're on Snopes now. What's the actual story on Snopes?
This is the picture you see here is the actual like guys who run the company. It's
they're the board of
men.
directors, but they might be hands off. They might not be.
They
might not actually be doing the bridge, which is why it collapsed.
But yeah. But yes, it wasn't built by a team full of women engineers. The woman in the article, because they never said she worked on the bridge in the article, did in fact not work on the bridge. She had nothing to do with the bridge. And
maybe she should have.
Yeah, I found out about it by
Matt. What do you man? Matt plays with fire.
This
Matt's just like every time Matt goes on a bridge, he's just like, I wonder if a woman was behind this. Just want to see if this whole thing just collapses.
I found out about this, what the right wing was saying about this,
right?
Because one of my regular trolls on Twitter tweeted this story at me, and was and said something like, "Oh, I bet you have nothing to say about this, Matt." And I replied to him, and I was just like, right, because nothing men have ever built has ever collapsed or fallen or failed in history.
Well, you'd have to test the testosterone rates. Maybe they were men, but maybe they tested low in testosterone. Should women be engineers? That'd be nice. Are they whores? Yes.
One of my favorite.
Will the bridge collapse? Probably.
One of my favorite memes I've seen trying to spread this is a picture of the collapsed bridge, and it says like a caption that says something like "made by a team of all women," and then next to it is a photo of the Roman Colosseum. Oh boy, yep. It's a world, their own little world, man. I love visiting it. I love visiting their world. It's a lot of fun.
It's like they did the same thing to the bridge that they did to Ghostbusters, taking pictures.
I'm waiting for the QAnon connection still.
Explain QAnon again.
Again?
Yeah, dude. Just a real brief one. Give me a little QAnon update.
So basically, every now and then on 4chan, someone who goes by the name Q posts these real cryptic 4chan posts, and they usually make no sense. They're written like prose or whatever.
Oh my God!
Yeah,
great.
And the guys on 4chan and other right-wing conspiracy theorists, like the fine fellows at InfoWars, Jerome Corsi, they like to parse these words in these posts and try to figure out what the actual message behind it is. And their belief is that someone from within the Trump administration, very high up, excuse me, or...
That was a first on this show.
Well,
thank you, Matt. It's very, very appropriate that it would be you.
Thank you. I'm very proud of that one. Not
great.
on the first. Some actually think, and this is where it gets real fun, think that it's...
Maybe let's just get him to 60 on Patreon.
It's Donald Trump himself. It's Donald Trump himself.
Donald Trump himself. So this actually requires the thought that he figured out his way to log onto 4chan.
Yes.
That seems like an unbelievable stretch of imagination.
Of course.
Yeah.
But the fun thing is, like, it's 4chan, so that means anyone can post anything, and you can actually... The only thing that makes it from Q is that at the end of writing whatever his message of the day is, he leaves a little letter Q at the end of it. As if nobody can just do this. No one can just type Q after writing a bunch of bullshit. That's basically the the cliff notes.
The
for
thing that
QAnon.
is basically driving the foreign and domestic policy of the Trump administration.
And the reason it's called QAnon is well, the guy leaves his thing Q, but it's also called the Storm Conspiracy. And the reason it's called the Storm is because they believe it all starts that in October 2017, when Donald Trump was vaguely just bullshitting to the media and saying this is the calm before the storm, and they believe that
calm before the storm,
right? And they
Not
believe
a
at that
calm.
moment,
That's why
Donald
that's
Trump.
what I call date night with Ivanka. Calm before the storm.
They believe at that moment Donald Trump set off this that was like the code word, like in Star Wars Order 66, where all the stormtroopers turn on the Jedi. It's like that was the code word to tell everyone, like, all right, we're gonna stop all the shit going on in the world, and Trump's now gonna reign supreme. Everything bad that happens to Trump now, it's all part of the grand master plan.
Oh, that's interesting. So like when the Mueller's like, we want to see like internal documents involving financial deals with Russia, that's a good thing.
Right? No, that's literally, you're laughing, but that's 110% what it is.
He's look at him, he's fucking nailing it.
I mean, it's never going to
Got
happen.
him right where he wants him.
I mean, it's never going to happen, but imagine, I'm picturing now Trump in cuffs being taken away, and they're like, this is all going just how Trump wants it, you know?
And then he signals it. He's just like, cuffs on me? Well, Commander. And then Corey Lewandowski comes out. He's like, this is like fucking martial law, dude, and date rape is legal now. And Donald Trump is president for life.
Right.
Those would be the first two executive orders.
And Corey Lewandowski was actually QAnon all along.
I also would question his ability to log on to 4chan. So, I mean, what's your take just like from a social media perspective on the whole, like the Russia thing pisses me off with everybody because there's a dumb contingent which like, it's like, especially because I think at the end of the day, I've said this a million times, nothing new to people, but for people who just, hearing me the first time on this, I think there's something there, and I think it's absolutely an organized crime, money laundering story.
Right.
And I think if you searched in Donald Trump's finances and you didn't find financial entanglements with, by the way, like multiple organized crime organizations, I would be shocked. Going
Trump's
back to
finances
the 80s.
is not on the up and up? This is news to me.
Hey, this would just be my guess. I haven't looked through it, right? But I would be like as surprised if they were clean as I would be if you told me he didn't want to fuck Ivanka. And both things would shock me. I don't know either of them for a fact, but they both would shock me. But on the other hand, I mean, obviously it's like the Mick resistance go-to, and it's weaponized against the left. But I just feel like so few people have been able to stake out also because, by the way, all of this stuff like information warfare, propaganda, social media, going back to like the story in 2016 with that Colombian hacker who worked for all those right-wing campaigns, like this is the way of the modern world. And of course the Russians are doing it, and we're doing it. And every single campaign, like we're going to need to get media literacy on this. So you can't like just deny it. But then at the same time, most people talking about it are idiots. So, I mean, what do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, I had just to plug the podcast here.
Yeah, go.
We spoke, I spoke with Adam Johnson of Citations Needed, and we had a whole hour-plus conversation about this very thing.
Right.
And it really bothers me because, listen, obviously, I agree with you that there's something there.
Right.
I even with the collusion angle with Trump or someone within Trump's administration or someone on the campaign. Again, I don't know how high up it goes. I highly doubt Donald Trump had any sort of like he's not DMing anyone on Twitter any secret information or anything.
DM? I don't get it.
But yeah, there's definitely something there in terms of they were working either directly or indirectly getting help from Russia in their campaign.
Right.
And again, I don't think anything will ever go up all the way to Trump, but there's something there, and it should be looked into. I'm not one of those weirdos who are like, the Mueller investigation is all bullshit. They shouldn't even be doing it. It's a waste of time.
Right.
But the hype and the panic and the hysteria behind the social media angle is unbelievable to me. And the fact that one thing that really bothers me is there are a lot of even smart liberal commentators I've seen who are like, no, like even whatever the Internet Research Agency, that troll farm that apparently, there were 13 people in that or that company or organization that were indicted in the FBI indictments for whatever they did in the election. It's not, again, it's completely not clear to me exactly.
Like Nubians for Trump Facebook page with
Right, black
250
activists
likes.
and woke blacks.
Right. Like, yeah. It was very effective propaganda. Yeah.
Right,
In fact,
right.
like the stuff that's getting indicted is the least effective propaganda on tap.
Right, and to me, it does. Like a lot of people are saying, no, it shouldn't matter how effective it was. They did something wrong, and we need to fine, whatever. But it does matter how effective it was, because why are we wasting all this time on it if it wasn't that effective?
Right.
It absolutely matters how influential it was, if these tactics actually worked, and how much they worked. If we're wasting all this time because remember CNN? They got a lot of there was a lot of talk when one of their reporters basically ambushed this random Trump supporting woman on her front lawn.
The woman in Florida.
Yeah.
They bothered her on her lawn.
She shared an event, a pro-Trump event that was apparently created by one of these guys working for
that's insane that she could get in trouble or ambush for that. Like, setting aside, like, of course, she supports Trump, she sucks, whatever.
But that's the
she
thing,
shared
though.
a fucking Facebook.
But that's
ridiculous,
like,
right?
She's a Trump supporter.
Right.
What effect did they have? She ran a pro-Trump Facebook fan page. What mind did they change? This woman was going to share that event, whether it doesn't matter who created it. She was going to share that event. And her sharing that event, her seeing that event, didn't change her mind, didn't change any of the people who follows her mind. She runs this pro-Trump fan page. Like, it's
by the way,
ridiculous that
there are two big ifs in this. Okay, maybe it will be revealed that Russia coordinated with Cambridge Analytica, right? And we still have no idea how effective Cambridge Analytica even was. I'm still 50% sure that their whole psychometric thing is bullshit. But if we were to say that Cambridge Analytica, that was like the most effective, ruthless arm of this propaganda campaign for Trump, then what do we know about it? It's a London-based Western firm with American plutocrat money that used compromised Facebook data that Facebook, at the very best, could care less about. So that means that the worst example we could find, as far as we know from all public information available, implicates an American plutocratic family, London consultants, and Facebook. The enemy is like, the message is coming from inside. It's the enemy's inside the gates.
Right.
It's not this external neurosis.
Listen, if there's other sort of Russian intelligence or Russian other Russian organizations working with Cambridge, they'd yet to be seen.
No, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
They'd yet to be seen.
Right.
But the what we have right now is the Internet Research Agency, this Russian troll farm, did things that would make the most newbie social media marketer look at and scoff at, because it was so bad. For example, they were running Facebook ads just randomly, it seems. I don't even think they were properly targeting who to show these to. That basically they looked online, they took an image from a Bernie Sanders coloring book that someone was selling on Amazon.
Nice. That's
basically a drawing of Bernie as a muscle, like a meathead, like on a beach.
Right.
And they were running ads with that picture.
Is that what got you into Bernie, Dave? Was that the... I actually should have asked you this before.
But what is this accomplishing? And listen, I totally get people, like, I don't think this changed any minds in terms of if you were a Hillary supporter, this stuff wasn't going to change your mind.
Right.
If you were a Trump supporter already, this stuff wasn't going to change your mind. People are arguing that.
I have to say, there are some Hillary people out there that I got news for you. Like, Donald Trump is not the only person who could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue.
Right.
And their fans will still be cool with them.
Right.
Whoa.
Right, yes.
Whoa, buddy.
Whoa, yeah.
I could kill somebody on Fifth Avenue.
Right. So, it's, they're saying it's the people who the Bernie bros who were dead enders, basically, is what they say. The Bernie or bus people. But I mean, either A, they were going to vote for Jill Stein or not vote at all.
Right.
Or B, what changed their mind wasn't these social media posts. It probably was the Podesta emails and the DNC email hacks, which to me is a huge deal. But again, we have no connection to connecting Russia to those two things yet. Not at all. And in fact, maybe we never will, because who knows? we don't know yet.
That's
it's
one
just
of
that
those things
simple.
that's amazing, though, because there's some people who are just completely like, of course that's a Russian hack.
Yeah, but we just don't know.
They accept that as fact, and then I'm genuinely like.
And what I do with those people is I
certainly-
sit them down and I say, listen, have you ever heard of a guy by the name of Seth Rich?
Seth Rich has to go.
But he
needs to die.
The fact that we're wasting all this time on these social media posts.
No, or maybe it was more like Bill was like, Hillary, maybe we could talk to Seth, figure this out together. We already talked. No more talking. It's time for my methods, Bill. I like the idea. Like, I don't know. Did you see Ozarks on Netflix?
No, I've not seen
They're
it
like
yet.
the old hillbilly couple. Like they're both super evil, but the husband's like half nice. So Bill, like when he's just like, well, I don't know, Darlene, maybe we could talk to him. And she's like, time for talking's over. And that's like Bill. He's just like, maybe we could talk to him, Hillary. And she's like, time for talking is over.
Right.
We already tried your methods.
Right.
Kill him and his family.
I'm going to India and saying something stupid.
Yeah. Yeah. We already tried outreach, Bill. I'm going to go to India. Trash 2/3 of the country, say. How the fuck does Hillary Clinton both be a global mass murderer and too incompetent to beat Donald Trump? Will always mystify
And also
me.
stumble down every flight of stairs she comes across.
Yeah, she's not been doing well in India.
Oh, poor Hill. All right, guys, here's what we're going to do. The post game. Matt and I have a lot more to talk about. We've got some new troll farm stories that are coming out, including one Matt is writing. We're going to play what would be our conservative sellout strategies, the four of us. We have your questions from the Discord. We got your calls. We got your IMs. It's all happening. I'm going to remind you once more about the show in a second, but first, Matt, remind everybody about Doomed.
Right. You can go to www.doomedpod.com. It's up on iTunes, Google Play. You could listen to it right from the website there. Also, I've been mentioning and plugging, but not to the effect of Michael. He's
Just do your own thing. Don't compare yourself to me.
I'm
Compare
propping
yourself
you
to
up
who
here.
you
How
were
often
yesterday.
how often do I say nice things about you?
Actually, fairly often.
I guess that's
Yeah.
true.
Compare
Just not
your-
publicly, maybe.
Yeah, compare yourself.
Patreon.com/Matt Binder.
There you go.
Don't give me one of Jordan Peterson's 12 bullshit rules.
Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not someone else. Translation, shut the fuck up. Actually, if he wrote translation, shut the fuck up, I would buy the book. That's definitely part of my 12 rules. Shut the fuck up. Look,
I actually think that's good advice just for everybody.
No, it's
there's
seriously helpful
in our
advice.
information environment. It's better to be more read than write.
I don't know if it's apocryphal. I feel like it could be one of those like fake Churchill quotes. It might even be a fake Machiavelli quote, but whoever said it, I like a true diplomat is someone who thinks twice before saying nothing. And that really should ring out in the culture.
Michael's words of wisdom.
Please like my Patreon page. It's an anecdote to chaos.
I gotta say, I just found out how much. I mean, obviously Jordan Peterson's making a lot. He's a professor. He sells books. He's a best-selling author, whatever. But I was just pretty shocked how much he's making on Patreon.
No, he does well on
Yeah,
Patreon.
jeez.
Yeah.
Big baller.
Big baller. Clean your room. I can't stop it. Get freaked out at Indians. I appreciate all of you so much. Patreon.com/TMBS. We're growing the show. The animations are here. They're going to be ready next week. Our first one, Nation of Islam, Obama on his relaunch WB show. Mark Blythe is coming. That pre-record is scheduled, and a couple of other big ones as well. Next week, Anoa Changa, Alona Minkowski. This Sunday, a primer with illicit history with Mike Hanna of Al Jazeera on Israel, Palestine, where we are today, the Ehud Olmert reign, and how the media covers that conflict. Thanks all of you. Patreon.com/TMBS. Keep spreading the word. We'll see you in the post-game patrons. Thanks, Matt. Thank
you.
Thanks, David. Thanks, everybody.